The Supreme Court ruled today on Arizona's controversial immigration law. I'm Megan Lieberman for the New York Times, and I am joined now by David Leonhardt in Washington. So David, the court issued a mixed decision here. They struck down 3 provisions, they upheld 1. Briefly decode for me what the court said.
If police are stopping people for other reasons and have reason to believe that they're illegal immigrants, they can ask to see their papers. They struck down a number of other things such as making it a crime to seek work if you're an illegal immigrant. And in striking down those other things, the court essentially said that the federal government has a lot of latitude to set immigration policies, and states have much less. And so this is clearly a mixed decision. The Obama administration will like the parts of the Arizona law that were thrown out. Republicans will like the part was kept in, and I think we can expect some other state laws, although not all of them, now to be challenged and potentially thrown out.
The one provision that was upheld, it did seem like they were potentially inviting additional challenges on that measure. Is that your read of what the court was saying?
Yeah, this case was never going to touch on the full waterfront of this issue, particularly as it relates to racial profiling. The court essentially made clear, and you really got the sense during arguments, that this wasn't going to be the last word and that we are likely going to have future cases on immigration. It's obviously an extremely fraught topic. People on both sides feel really strongly about it. I mean, one of the ways we saw that today was we saw Scalia from the bench vociferously criticizing the recent Obama administration's act to allow children who come here illegally to stay under certain circumstances. That's fairly unusual to have a sitting Supreme Court justice criticize a law, a government policy that's not even before the court. And that's just an example of really how high the passions are around this. And so certainly I think we can expect more immigration rulings from the High Court in the years to come.
Now, this was a 5-3 decision with Justice Kennedy and Justice Roberts joining the liberal justices. Elena Kagan recused herself from this decision. So it wasn't our typical 5-4 that we predict on either side. Is there anything that we can read into that?
Well, I mean, what's interesting about that is that because Kagan recused herself, she had worked on this case when in the administration. Roberts was effectively the deciding vote once Kennedy went over to the 3 remaining liberals. And so sometimes people hypothesize that when Kennedy moves over to make it a 5-4 decision, Roberts goes with him to then make it not a 5-4 extremely tight decision. It also means Roberts has the potential to write the decision as a member of the majority. But in this case, by going with the majority, Roberts really decided the case. It otherwise would have been a draw. And so you're right, it's not every case before the court is one of these 5-4 decisions with Kennedy as the swing vote. It's more complicated than that.
The court also struck down a Montana decision that had sort of ruled against conflicted with the Citizens United decision. What do we think the impact of that is likely to be?
It'll be relatively small, less than the immigration case. It essentially upholds the status quo. It's the court basically saying we are not going to revisit the issues in Citizens United. That ruling still stands, and Montana, which tried to do its own workaround, the court said that it could not do so. So this is in many ways a reaffirmation of the 5-4 Citizens United decision, with the conservative justices, including Kennedy, in the majority and the liberals in the minority.
So is there anything that we can look at from either of the decisions today, and project forward to health care, which we expect is going to come on Thursday?
Well, that is the big question. I mean, this immigration case is big, but health care is much bigger.
It's the big one, yeah.
It's the big one. I just don't think we know. I mean, you could look at this and you could see Kennedy and Roberts going with the liberals on much of the Arizona case, and you could imagine that we'll see that same coalition again. Or you could say, look, this is the way in which Roberts disappoints the conservatives this term. He's not going to do it again on health care. The fact is we don't know, and we'll find out very soon.
Stay tuned. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Megan.
I'm joined now by Jim Rutenberg to talk more about the politics of this decision. So Jim, I'm sure we're going to hear more from the president on this later. This is a partial, at least, legal win for him. Politically, is it a win for him?
With the caveat that, we never know how these really play out, and often what we think a minute after a decision or any major movement in the political world changed. But I think it seems like a win only in that we're talking about this issue. And think about this. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how Hispanics, the Latino community, was still going to probably vote for Obama, but was disappointed,
They weren't
deflated.
excited.
In the last 2 or 3 weeks, now he's a champion on 2 major issues. And today, his initial statement says he's concerned about the parts of the law that are standing. So here's their champion, Obama. 2 weeks ago, not the case.
Right. Now, this is obviously trickier for Mitt Romney, who's been actually a vocal supporter of this law, but is trying to now kind of finesse his relationship with the Hispanic community. And he also released a statement, which I just want to read to you. He said, "Today's decision underscores the need for a president who will lead on this critical issue and work in a bipartisan fashion to pursue a national immigration strategy. President Obama has failed to provide any leadership on immigration." Sounds a lot like what he said on Thursday when he was speaking to Hispanic elected officials, and probably not going to cover this issue for him, is it?
I don't. Well, he is in such a rough box. I mean, he called this law a model. Now, 3 of the provisions have been struck away by the court. So, just in terms of wannabe chief executive of the country, what do you think of that? Was your thinking wrong when you said it was a model? I wonder if he'll put himself in a position to even answer that question. He's been keeping his discussion about Hispanic, Latino issues in terms of the economy. That might work across all segments, but immigration is central to these voters.
Yeah, and he actually is not scheduled to have any sort of press appearances today, but he's actually going to Arizona later for a fundraiser, which is, they said, was unplanned to sort of coincide with the decision. But it does keep putting this pressure on him to keep addressing this issue, and it keeps it front and center, which is just not the issue he wants front and center.
Right. Well, so independent experts say,
experts say.
They say that Romney's going to need some 40% of the Hispanic vote to win, to beat Obama. I never know about those slicing and dicings of the electorate, whatever. But we do know that George Bush in 2004 won 44% of Latinos. The Republican Party was starting to make huge gains. McCain 4 years ago went down to kind of the low 30s. Romney's got to do better than McCain.
Right. In the polling now, he's around 25 in most of the polls, and about 40% gap. And they do say, like, it's pretty much impossible for him to win if he doesn't get above where he is now.
Right. And there's time. There's a lot of time. But this issue is so tricky. And it just shows you those primaries that are now distant memory really mattered. They really locked him in.
No, he is in this box because he can't completely renounce what he did before, but he's got to try and finesse that relationship. And this keeps this issue alive because there's this one provision which is going to still be challenged again.
And we're going to talk about it for 3 days until the healthcare decision.
Exactly. So he's sort of stuck with this conversation. I also just wonder about the court itself with this, Jim. Is the fact that we're having these huge, monumental decisions on stuff that are big issues in the election going to make the court itself just a bigger factor in this election than it might otherwise be?
Yeah, definitely, because we always talk about the court in presidential campaigns in terms of abortion, gun rights, these kind of single issue voter issues. This is central policy. This is what the election's about. The Supreme Court is in the middle of it. And as you and David were just saying, there's a growing perception that it is a completely partisan, polarized body.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you.
I'm joined now by Julia Preston in the newsroom.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Julia. So, Julia, how do you think this decisions can be received just on the ground in Arizona? What's the political fallout there going to be?
Well, I think even though the victory for Arizona is narrow in legal terms, it is the basis for a big claim of political victory by Governor Jan Brewer and her allies who passed the law in Arizona. I'm anticipating that they will say that this was a big win for them because the most disputed and controversial provision of the law will go into effect.
So what does this mean for other states who might be interested in enacting their own Arizona-style immigration laws? Does this make it more likely for them to do this, less likely for them to do this?
I think it's a mixed picture. I mean, on one hand, it has an important effect of relief for those states that have already enacted these laws, because the ruling does recognize that there is some space for states to enforce federal immigration law. And so we're talking about Georgia, Alabama, Utah, South Carolina, Indiana. Those states, I think, will get some legal relief from this ruling and may be able to go forward with some provisions of their laws. But I don't think this decision by the court today is going to encourage necessarily other states, because the three provisions that were struck down are really a ringing endorsement by the court of the federal province, the federal authority in immigration law. And I think that will give pause to other states that are thinking of moving forward. And also, this whole issue has become so prickly that I think other states are going to be wary as well on political grounds. It's a victory today for Arizona in political terms, but in terms of its echo effect, I think it doesn't necessarily encourage other states to go down that very controversial and disputed role that Arizona took.
So, but these states that are already sort of down the track with this, are they going to change what they're doing? Are they just going to, as you say, take some solace in the legal relief that they're getting from the court on this?
Yeah, well, many of those laws, or if not all of those laws, have been subject to the same kind of challenge that Arizona faced, and mainly on preemption grounds, but also on some civil rights grounds. And some parts of those laws will now be able to go forward, because there will be, the other appeals courts will look at what the court did, the high court did today, and they will allow some aspects of those laws to go forward.
But as far as legislation goes, we're pretty much going to be concentrated in the states, right? In an election year, it's not likely we're going to see any big congressional initiatives on immigration, is it?
Well, you know, Arizona acted saying that they had to do something about immigration enforcement because there was gridlock in Congress, and I think there's still gridlock in Congress on this issue. I don't think we're going to see any movement on that, and I don't think this ruling shakes anything loose politically in Congress until the election is over.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.
That's all for today. We're going to have a lot more on immigration and the future campaign, the future ruling on health care. Stay with us online. I'm Megan Lieberman. Thanks for watching.